the pleasure of introducing our afternoon panel, and I'm going to introduce our host for the panel, and then our host is going to introduce all the panel folks. So the panel discussion is Talking the Walk, Effectively Communicating the Benefits of Nature, and Dr. Mark Campbell is going to be our host for this panel. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Mark as I was his trainer during his ANFT training, so he recently became a guide. And Mark has a wealth of experience. He's an executive officer on the Wellness Council of America Board of Directors. He has a background in exercise science, sports medicine, and sports and performance psychology, and a PhD in health promotion and wellness. He's led performance and wellness-based programs in the States for the Army, for the Department of Defense, for a variety of universities, even a Major League Baseball team that won the World Series. And he works with various organizations and performers to help them up level themselves and build in this element of wellness. He has a huge love of the natural world, and it's a big part of how he works with people. So becoming a guide was a perfect fit for him. And if you don't know, Mark created a podcast with a colleague. It's called Nature of Wellness. It's absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend you check it out. And with that, Mark, I'm gonna invite you to take it away.
Thank you so much, Rana. I'm so excited to be here. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up. Okay, great. So excited to be here. When I was asked to do this, it was a very excited and boisterous yes. I didn't have to think about it much. And the plans changed a few times about the session, and I think we landed on just about the best version of what this could look like. And I'm really excited about this super special group of folks with me today. As Rana mentioned, I have the Nature of Wellness podcast, and I'm very fortunate to have three incredible experts. They're probably going to hate that I call them experts. Three incredible experts across the nature, education, and wellness fields who just happen to be guests on season 2 of the podcast. So I've gotten to know them pretty well. Ryan, I've known for years now. Actually, when Ryan and I first met, it was at a wellness conference, and I said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to start this new thing. I can't talk about it yet. It was the Nature of Wellness company and podcast, but it's going to be fun. I'd love to have you be a part of it." So he's gotten to see it grow from the very beginning. Sara and Susan, I've gotten to know pretty well. Can't wait to do more with them and collaborate. So without further ado, I'd love to just run around the horn and introduce everybody quickly, and then we'll just jump right into a couple of questions. Sara Espinoza is the president and CEO of the National Environmental Education Foundation, or NEEF. She oversees strategic leadership, driving the organization's mission, values, and vision while ensuring effective governance and sustainable growth. Before joining NEEF, Sara worked on education programs for World Wildlife Fund and the Jane Goodall Institute. She holds a BA from Bucknell University, a master's in environmental management from Duke. She loves traveling, cooking, reading, and exploring DC neighborhoods with her rescue dog, Minnie. Next, we have Dr. Susan Macino. Susan is the Vernon Russo Professor of Applied Science at Trinity College and was recently a Charles Bullard Fellow in Forest Research at Harvard University. Her biomedical research focuses primarily on brain health. She has investigated the relationship among metabolism, neuronal function, and behavior with particular interest in adenosine, a molecule that links metabolism and brain activity. She's focused on forest ecosystems and public policies that can support and improve brain health, and has co-authored the seminal paper on proforestation as a strategy to mitigate climate change and protect all species. Next, we have Ryan Picarella. Ryan's worked with communities and organizations around the world to ignite social movements while improving the lives of all people. Widely known for his thought leadership, Ryan has worked with Fortune 500 companies, been a keynote speaker at global conferences, and currently serves as Executive Director of Wellness Programming for the International Foundation of Employee Benefits, overseeing all wellness-related education and events, including the National Wellness Institute, the Wellness Council of America, and the Arts and Science of Health Promotion Conference Series. He's also a senior fellow with WE in the Nation, We in the Nation, focusing on well-being and equity around the world, and is founder of Conscious Disruption, a firm dedicated to personal and organizational transformation. Again, I'm just blown away. I feel like the dumb kid on this panel. Just blessed to be able to surround myself with amazing people like this. Um, I would love to start off with Ryan. Let's talk about health and wellness first, sort of to set the stage, and then we'll talk about how do we effectively communicate the benefits of nature and nature time on those health and wellness concepts. So, Ryan, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges in communicating about wellness?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. That was a beautiful introduction. It's nice to be with all of you. So thank you. It's grateful to be with you and my new friends, Sarah and Susan. So nice to join you guys as colleagues as well. I think that one of the challenges when communicating wellness is like the benefits, right? It's just how do we really get people to intrinsically know, understand, and really find and feel the value of that. And so I think that a lot of times in wellness, and as you know, most of my space is really spent on the work site, right? So how do we get people to intrinsically feel motivated to want to seek out wellness and seek out nature and to find these moments of healing? And so I think it's tough. And so really being able to really communicate, it's not what you should do or need to do, but how do you really talk to people about like conveying that this is what the right thing to do, right? Like the intrinsically part of it. So I think that's the challenge for all of us.
Yeah. And just for everybody listening, I know wellness is a concept that's sort of how do I want to put this? Squishy, if you will. Everybody on the call who's a nature professional will understand that. I'm sure we hear that a lot about the work that we do in the natural world too. But nature is one of those foundational concepts of human existence that's so important. And it's so often misunderstood or misutilized or misrepresented. Can you talk a little bit about what wellness actually is?
Yeah, so I think that's the challenge, right? So wellness is you can ask 15 people what wellness is, right? And you'll get 15 different answers to that. So wellness is what gives us hope, what gives us purpose, what gives us part of that a piece of our life that we get up every day and want to live and want to feel. And so I think wellness is a variety of things. And I think for a long time wellness became the sort of physical dimension of wellness, that we need to have X amount of steps or drink X amount of water and do all of these things. And that's not actually wellness. That wellness is wanting to get out of bed in the morning and to like feel the sunshine and to ride a bike and to like smell the flowers or to do whatever. And so I think it's very different for a lot of people, but I think wellness is whatever that little piece of us that makes us just want to get up and to feel and to live. And so how do we inspire that in those that we serve? And so that there's a lot of different ways to do that, but it could be whether it's gardening or CrossFit or walking around or laying on the ground. I mean, there's no right or wrong. And I think that's the thing. I think there's a lot of around wellness that might be fear-based, right? Like I'm scared of going in the woods. I'm scared of doing this. But I think at a very simplistic level, just allowing yourself to be in the presence of nature. And it's not complicated and it's easy. And there's, as you know, and you're going to talk about, like can be incredibly impactful. So
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's, wellness is a concept. If you take nothing else from it, it's holistic, it's whole person. We're made up of a lot of different parts. I like to explain it, since we're talking about communicating the message, I like to explain it as each of us is like a stained glass window, right? And each of those
love
dimensions of
that.
wellness is a pane in that window. And to be complete and to be whole, we have to allow the light to shine through and hit all of those panes to really show the accurate and beautiful version of what that picture looks like. And far too often we get busy, we get pulled in too many directions, and we start knocking those little panes out, right? One by one. And it's sort of like we can still make out the picture, we can still make out the image, but it's not beautiful and whole and as bright as it could be. And like you said, Ryan, for far too often, it's been looked at as physical based. And one thing that really transcends all of the topics we're going to cover in this panel is the fact that we have professionals who are really good at one area,
Yeah.
right? And they embrace the one area and they promote the one area as the full concept, right? Personal training is not wellness, it's part of wellness. Chiropractic is not wellness, it's part of wellness, right? And that's one thing I love about the Wellness Council, what I love about National Wellness Institute. We'll talk about some big news with those two organizations in a bit. Ryan and I, before Wellco, were both board members for the National Wellness Institute as well. And they came up with a very simplified definition of wellness, which was only 6 words long. And I love it so much because it makes it easy and it's functioning optimally within your current environment. And I love that so much because it doesn't talk about step challenges. It doesn't talk about drinking water. It doesn't talk about meditation. It's whatever you need to help you function at an optimal level where you currently are. And for us, all of us on the call, nature is the best place to do that. I say it every day. Nature was the first classroom. It was the first hospital. It was the first teacher, the first preacher, the first counselor, right? The first grocery store. So being in nature truly helps us to optimize all of those different dimensions of who we are, really allowing the light to shine through that stained glass. So Ryan, thank you for that. We'll come back. I know we have some other big things to talk about. Thank you for your answer. Susan. Yeah, Susan, I would love to pick your brain for a minute. You've got one of those 500-pound brains that I just always learn from, and I just love everything you say. I can't get enough of it. I'm always smarter whenever we talk. And just a side note, Susan and I were in the same Arnica cohort, and Rana was our instructor. So we met during guide training and have become fast friends and hopefully colleagues for a long time. I mean what I say, Susan. You definitely make me better. And I know that your area is neurology, right? That's a big focus area for you. How does nature, and I know we've probably talked about it in previous sessions during this conference, but in your opinion, what are the main takeaways for how nature impacts our neurological self?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Wonderful to be here with you and Sara and Ryan. And I'm actually trained primarily as a neuroscientist, not as a neurologist. So I just wanted to clarify that.
That's my fault.
I love a quote. Well, I shouldn't make jokes like this, but I'm a doctor, but not the kind that helps people. But I think that's wrong because that is the point of my work, is helping people. And I just want to follow up on a couple of things that Ryan mentioned. First of all, that it's not complicated. And I think that's a really important message. And I also liked the aspirational quality of wellness that you brought up, because I think sometimes we try to break down our health into just tiny little pieces. And the work that I did in basic neuroscience was trying to look at kind of root cause mechanisms that are related to our behavior and metabolism and functional changes that can occur. And I think nature is such a powerful, holistic force for all of that. And while we can talk about blood pressure and immune system function and all these kind of buckets of things that all work together, I really wanted to share with you, I went to an annual conference on Olmsted, actually, with the Olmsted Network, and spoke at that a couple of weeks ago. And I want to relay what a kind of design studio found when they surveyed the community to help them to connect with nature. What did they really want? And what people really said they wanted from nature, they weren't talking about sports or programming or anything. They said that they just wanted to relax. And the power of nature to help your brain and body relax is a pathway to creativity and compassion and all of the aspirational things that our brain can offer us and makes us human and helps us to take care of ourselves and each other. So we can talk about all the specific things, but I just think it's really important to kind of always reach back to the humility of what we don't know and the power of these natural systems, and think about the uniquely human things that nature can help us connect with, like creativity and compassion. And I think the more that I've dug into those more holistic concepts like mystery and compassion and creativity as an antidote to kind of the despair and anxiety that a lot of people are feeling, I think this is one of the squishy things you might want to talk about wellness, but it's really one of the most important things that we can't be afraid to talk about and cannot be dissuaded from talking about just because you think it's squishy. It's really important. So that's, I think, what I would like to say. And one other tiny thing to mention is the other things that promote kind of the mystery and accessing those pathways are just sometimes the quiet, the sounds, the dark that nature provides. And sometimes people aren't comfortable with quiet and dark and all of that. And it's not complicated. And sometimes you just kind of forget about these fundamental things, and finding ways to help people get back to that and feel comfortable with that is a real lesson for people in their own personal resilience.
No, I love that. Biophobia is a real thing. We talk about it a lot on the show, and we've had some mental health professionals talking about it on the show, why it happens. I say often, where Sara is in DC, kids are taught not to go outside in a lot of cases. They're taught not to go hang out by trees because that's where drug deals happen. That's where gang members hide their weapons, right? So they're dissuaded. They're building those neural pathways, neural connections around fear, right? And the city of DC is doing great work with trying to promote memorial gardens. So if someone's lost to gang violence, they'll plant a tree, and then parents will take the children there and show them that trees are beautiful and trees are meaningful and symbolic, and try to take away some of that scary. So yeah, thank you so much for that. The Olmsted conference sounds phenomenal. I'd love to make it there someday. And as far as squishy goes, one of my past lives, I was the lead for performance psychology for the Army, and I worked with Special Operations Command. So trying to teach a bunch of Navy SEALs about meditation and mindfulness and wellness. I got really good at talking about squishy. I couldn't hide from it. Had to face it head on. So never afraid to talk about squishy. And I encourage everybody on the call. I mean, I know we'll talk a little bit more about the communication tactics, but don't be afraid to talk about things. If you think it's squishy, as Susan said, those are some of the most important things, and we avoid them because we think they're silly or we're going to get judged. But those are the ones that make the biggest difference usually. So thank you for that, Susan. Sara, I just had a chance to hang out with Sara a few weekends ago at National Public Lands Day at the National Arboretum in DC. We planted some trees together, which was amazing. Your work is so important, Sara. And I was wondering if you could, just for a moment, briefly talk about the National Environmental Education Foundation mission and where you fit in the structure of things governmentally, and what your role is with helping to introduce people to nature.
Sure, yes. So NEF, the National Environmental Education Foundation, we are actually a congressionally chartered nonprofit. So we were created by Congress in 1990 as a complement to EPA and their environmental and public health mission. We operate independently, but work closely with EPA and many federal agencies, including all of the federal land management agencies. Our mission is to make the environment more accessible, relevant, and connected to people's daily lives. And I've heard a lot of things from Ryan and Susan already that really resonate in terms of that mission and those particular words: accessible, relevant, connected. And when I was thinking about this conversation today, NEF has a broad range of work. We focus on people of all ages. We work across conservation, education, and health. But what really stood out to me in terms of conveying the message about health and wellness is some of the work that we've done through grant programs. And the reason that rose to the top is because I think it's incredibly important for organizations like NEF to recognize that we are often not the most trusted nor effective messenger when it comes to these topics. And that really part of our job is to work at the community level with those who are, to get that message out and provide the right opportunities to engage. And I'll give you just a really quick example. Mark knows this. We've recently given out some grants focused on getting veterans into nature spaces for physical and mental health benefits. And that's a case where NEF going out and creating a program to do that would not have been the right approach. So we talked to veterans communities, we did a survey, we stood this grant up and we were able to fund 10 projects with veteran-led and veteran-serving organizations around the country that are doing this work. And one of the other messaging things that I think is really important about that is that many of these organizations are also able to position nature and time in nature for health benefits as part of a much bigger ecosystem of supports and services that veterans communities need: employment assistance, housing assistance, mental health services. So those are, it's an example of the work that NEAF does. And I think the work that we do as an intermediary to be able to support that messaging and outreach at a community level.
I love that. And I'm glad you brought up the idea of community and the concept of community, because that's something that affects all of us, something that we've taken a bit of a hit on recently. And again, not to get into politics by any means, but we're so divisive as a country and as a species right now. And that's something I talk about literally every show. I'm known for saying that we've only made it this far as a species together. The fact that we think we can do it apart isn't boding well for us, right? We need each other. And being able to talk to each other about these concepts, about health and wellness, about how our brains are affected being outside, about what environmental connections mean, and not just how we benefit from being outside in the environment, but how we can take care of it as well, which I know is a big part of your work. A lot of your work is done with communities, Sara. Can you talk a bit about some of the community projects and messaging that NEAF does to get the word out on the community level?
Sure. So a lot of our community level work happens through grants. So the veterans is one example. Another example that's really relevant here is some grant making we did around mobility and accessibility on public lands. Again, working in partnership with people with disabilities, organizations that work with people with disabilities to think about how accessibility to space is such an important component of access to nature, right? And that sometimes part of the message before the health message is, can I use this space? Is there a place for me there? And how do I feel safe there?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's another kind of community level conversation that we were able to support through partners, again, who are really experts in this space. Yeah, I'll leave it there. I know we have limited time here. So
no, I think that's great. And being able to have those conversations and work together and collaborate in that way is so important. And that makes me want to jump back over to Ryan for a second. In this field, collaboration is everything, right? And it's so important, and it's not often celebrated. It's not often leaned into. We operate in silos a lot in the healthcare and the wellness fields. Can you talk a bit about what's happening with Wellness Council, with National Wellness Institute, as far as community and bringing different types of wellness professionals together?
Yeah, totally. So thank you. Wellness is so multidimensional, right? I mean, so it's really such a collaborative effort between so many different pieces and parts. And I think that's like the gift and the challenge, right? That wellness is not one thing, that it's so many different things, that it takes all of that. And so I'll get back to that. But you and I have been in this field for a long time, man. It's been the greatest gift to be able to do this. It's been one of the biggest challenges talking about wellness, for years. And I've always loved what you said. How do we really, legitimize the field of wellness again? And that's really the goal here. And so, as you know, I was, I led WellCoa for about 10 years. I left for a period, came back, and now we've got the Wellness Alliance, which you're a part of. And so really it's how do we bring this field together in a way that really showcases the benefits of healthy companies, the hows, the whats, all of these pieces. And I don't know, man. You and I, we've talked about this. I know, like, over beers, like, what's the ROI, right? So how do we really, and it seems so obvious, right? That an organization, or really anybody, a community, a church, whatever the case is, that if you invest in your people and you help your people live a healthy, happy life, like the returns just seem so obvious. but yet
Yeah.
there seems to be this question like, well, what is it? And so I want to be, a part of that as well. It's like, how do we really like, a healthy community, healthy organization, all of that has, incredible benefits. And so I think that's being able to communicate that, talk about that is a huge part of what we do as well. And so like the future is to be had, right? I think that's, that's where we're at. So it's exciting, I think, to see where we go. Nature is a huge part of that. And the cool part that I've said, most of wellness actually doesn't cost any money. It's not expensive, right? Like going outside, enjoying some of these things. I think we've overcalculated or put this price tag on what it costs to be well. And actually it's nothing, like just taking some moments and living that. So I think it's like that's also the pretty exciting part. How do we really begin to talk about, nature and wellness, and how do we be well in community and social connection, all of these things that don't actually cost anything, but really can have a pretty big impact. And so like that's where we're headed.
I love it. And you mentioned the Wellness Alliance. Can you take just a minute and talk about what that is?
Yeah, so the Wellness Alliance, so the Wellness Council of America was founded back in the 80s and was really focused on the work site. The National Wellness Institute was founded back in the 70s, and that was also, and so there's all these not-for-profits, right, they're coming together looking at how do we help people live their best lives. And so Alcoa is very focused on the work site. National Wellness Institute was on the individual and others. And so it's a tough time. I think, COVID really shined a light on a lot of these organizations. And so the goal is how do we bring together the best of the best, bring together these not-for-profits that really, whose whole focus is to make people live their best lives. And so that's the foundation, the International Foundation of Employee Benefit Plans, came together and said, how do we, bring together the National Wellness Institute, WACOA, the best of the best. And so that's our goal, is how do we really bring all of these resources and organizations together to amplify wellness. And so that's our goal. That's where we're at, man. And you're a huge part of this, and grateful to have you on the journey as well. And so that's the road we're on.
Well, thank you. And honestly, when I first joined the National Wellness Institute, my first question was, why aren't they all working together in this
Right.
way? It just makes sense. The more you can overlap safety nets, the smaller the holes get and the harder it is for people to fall through. So I'm a true believer that we have more access to resources than ever before in our existence, but we're the most unwell we've ever been as a species. So there's a huge disconnect there. And I think that we're really good at loving the novel and the new and the glittery and the shiny, which is usually expensive. To your point about being free, I think sometimes we just need to take a step back and look at what's available for us that everybody has access to in some way, shape, or form, and just educating people on what that looks like. So I'm really excited about where the wellness field is going. It fits so beautifully with nature. At the National Arboretum, Sara, you had a nature forest therapy guide there set up, tucked away in the trees, and had a table and information and books and different invitations, and people were going around and had a little two different ways to receive invitations, which I thought was genius. It was fun, it was interactive, but I was like, man, this is wellness, right? And I was talking to a young man. We were planting trees together. We were the two shovelers, and he said, I'm out here every weekend. And I said, why? And he said, every Saturday morning I wake up, I roll out of bed, I come here, I plant trees for half a day or whatever they need me to do, and then I go about my weekend. And I said, well, you're mid-20s. I'm sure you have a lot of other things you want to do. Why do you come here? And he said, because of my mental health. I was struggling with depression. I saw a therapist. The therapist said, what do you do for yourself that you enjoy? He said, I love being outside. He's from DC, very urban area. He said, I just love being outside. Discovered the Arboretum, discovered programs, like what Neef is talking about. And he goes there every weekend. And he said, my mental health has never been better my entire life. Right. That's wellness, and it's free. He's actually giving back and being a servant leader, which Dan Buettner in the Blue Zones would be all over, saying that's one of the things that helps us live longest, right? Serving and giving back and having purpose in that way, which is spiritual wellness. So there's a great way to bring all of these different programs and professionals together. And the biggest thing, in my opinion, that gets in the way, whether it's nature or healthcare or wellness, is an acronym. I like to say EGO. I'll let that sink in for a second. Ego. but the acronym is easily gets offended. The people with the biggest egos are usually the ones that get their feelings hurt first, and they try to grab onto everything and not let anybody else in. This is mine. That's the ego, right? But as a species, we've never been that way. We've been there to lift each other up and to help each other and say, hey, I have this, you have that. Let's see how they work together. Right. So for me, nature, wellness, all of these things fit so beautifully together. And I think it's really about educating healthcare providers as to how to utilize the natural world, which is kind of why we're here today, to talk about how to talk about it. And Susan, as a university professor, that's kind of what you do, right? You're talking to the next generation of folks going out in the field and talking to them about how to utilize nature, how it impacts them in different ways. Can you talk about that a little bit and how you shape your messaging to the next generation of professionals?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate enough to work at a liberal arts college, and I made a very purposeful decision to do that because of the, kind of interdisciplinary opportunities at a liberal arts college. And one of the things that I really try and impress upon my students is that they're basically in charge of their brain. So we need to curate our own habits of mind and relationships and our, interactions with the environment, because really your brain is like an output device, right? So the ways that I've tried to provide pathways for nature for my students is I'm sort of the shepherd of a community garden that's owned by the college, and I help to have our college campus declared an arboretum, and the principles for the mission and values for our arboretum are, of course, how can we do the best we can with our little piece of nature in the city, but also what are the bigger issues that this connects to? So that's what I'm always trying to do, is connect from kind of the local place person to kind of the bigger issues. And that's why I am 100% focused right now on helping people to understand that we need community gardens, we need arboreta, we need farms, we need parks, but we also need natural areas. It's not optional. And there's no plan for that. And I really see all of the work I've been doing for all of my life in biology and ecology has really led to this point. And I think there's insufficient expertise in the complexity of biology and ecology at kind of the top level decisions of things. And if you don't understand and appreciate the complexity of those systems, you tend to be able to make decisions about things that aren't really fully appreciating that. So I've really been focused on not just the garden or the arboretum, but trying to find little pieces of nature, what I call community wilds, in the city that people can connect to, a little forest, a little patch by the river. And what has been so gratifying to me is looking back and thinking through history. This was something, indigenous cultures always had some sacred places. Olmsted is known for his parks to provide democratic spaces for people to connect with nature in cities, but also for grander areas for science and art. So I'm just trying to think about how to connect people to these little pieces of nature so that we will then have the wherewithal to know that we need to make a network of big pieces, and have the humility to know that we don't know everything, and we can't be continually scraping and burning and logging and plowing every inch of the earth. We just don't know enough to do that. In fact, we know we shouldn't. And so that's really what my life has been focused on now. How do we keep our brains healthy? And how do we have the wherewithal to have the humility to leave a network of nature that we all need to survive? It's very, very, very serious. So I'm trying to use every little piece is like a gateway to the bigger issues.
Oh, I love that. And thank you so much for your work. I mean, I'm completely in awe of everything that you're doing right now. And every time I talk to you, you're doing something different and adding to it. So you're definitely a crusader. As a professor of integrative medicine at a university out west, I teach nature as one of the therapies, and it's for healthcare providers who are coming back and getting an advanced degree. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see that it's so intuitive, right? They push back at first, right? If they're pick a discipline in healthcare, they immediately push back first, back to the squishy comment, right? This isn't Western allopathic, you know, hardcore medicine. But after the first few weeks of that section of the course, they love it. It's every time it's the favorite portion of the course. And they always follow up and say, how can I do more? How can I do more? And that's when I can send them to places like the Wellness Alliance and to NEEF and say, there are these great organizations out there. Learn as much as you can and tell the story. And that's, as we're starting to wind down here, I want to make sure that we cover this last question. And it's all about, some key takeaways for the listeners and the audience on effectively communicating about these topics, right? And, I'll just throw something out there. You have to be able to tell your story, right? You have to be emotionally connected to it. If you're emotionally connected to something, then you're committed, right? And I learned a long time ago, I've been a storyteller, full transparency. I've been speaking in public since I was 8 years old. I used to enter storytelling contests in the mall in the next town. I grew up in a really small town in Kentucky. There was not much to do. So at 8 years old, I was in the food court telling stories, right? So I've always loved storytelling. It's our first and most primal form of communication with each other. And I learned a long time ago, if you can't tell your story, or if you don't tell your story, somebody will come along quickly and tell it for you. And it's usually not in the right way. So this is so important to Susan. We learned this in the certification process, being able to talk about what we do as guides, to be able to talk about forest therapy and forest bathing and the nuanced difference, and looking at the forest as the therapist and the guide opens the door. One of my favorite all-time lines, right? To be able to work with complementary healthcare providers, Ryan, health and wellness coaches, and nature therapy guides work together so beautifully, right? And I would love to push a lot more health and wellness coaches into the guide space to go through training. There's so many different ways that we can piece this together, but the first part is knowing how to talk about your own story and having that personal connection. So if we could start, Susan, if you want to start us, just any key takeaways you have for the audience about effectively communicating.
Can I pass it to
Sure.
someone else and they'll go after? Let me think for a minute.
Yeah. Sara, Ryan.
I'm happy to jump in. I think the one thing that I think is really important is that meeting people where they're at, right? That everybody has different comfort levels with nature. Not everybody's super comfortable with walking in the woods or doing whatever. And so bringing that psychological safety, like bring that comfort level, like it's different for everybody depending on where you're at, whether you're in urban areas or rural or whatever. So I think it's just acknowledging that it's not that easy, right? Like, and how do we make it accessible and safe and special and have those feelings? And that means a lot of different things. So I think that's important. And giving the space to experience and to do it, right? And I think that's also like, how can, again, my work is mostly the organizational side. Like, how can you be the catalyst for that work and to be an advocate for nature in a safe and protected and, comfortable way? And I think that's really important as well. It's funny, I've seen, organizations like, oh, just go outside and take a walk. Well, it's just not that easy, right? Like it's more to just getting outside and taking a walk. So I think acknowledging that, like owning it and helping people like find their space through that is incredibly important. And harnessing the power of nature, right? Like we said earlier, like it's free and it's beautiful and it's impactful. And so how do we bring that gift, to people in a really special way, and in a way that wants them to get to come back? I mean, you're a wellness guy. I mean, the holy grail is like the intrinsic motivation, right? Like it's not extrinsic rewards. It's how do we get people to really feel deeply in their own hearts and souls that this is the right thing for them. And so like teaching them that, I think, is also a big part of the journey as well.
I love that. Thank you so much. Sarah.
Excuse me.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with everything Ryan just said. I'll add on to what I said earlier, which is I think the messenger is just as important as the message. And, leaning on when you said about ego, Mark, is that we get out of that by acknowledging that sometimes we aren't the ones who need to be speaking. And the other thing, Susan, listening to you talk about your work really struck me because I've been in environmental education for my whole career. And a criticism that I hear frequently and don't agree with is that this is a long game. It doesn't have an impact. You're not changing policy. You're not making systemic change that we need to make to address some of these really big issues that we're facing as a planet. And I think what you just described underscores that experience is communication. And when we give people opportunities to spend time outside in ways that are meaningful for them and draw their attention to those places, ultimately, that's a really important first step to getting to those much bigger kind of systemic changes. So I think that's the other thing that I would add is just in terms of communication and connection, this work is really important at a foundational level.
I love that. I love the theme throughout both of the first two of you who answered is really about meeting people where they're at, right? And learning about the person and building rapport and building trust. And, I've been in healthcare for a long time, helping people with different abilities find plan B, right? After traumatic injury or illness. And it's always about building that rapport and trust. And every time we take somebody outside, every time we sit down with someone in a wellness capacity or healthcare capacity, we're taking that person into our safe space, and we're saying, hey, we're here for you, but you're kind of responsible for that person, right? So you're taking them out into the woods for a walk, out into the forest or the edge of a parking lot or wherever else. You're sort of responsible for that. We all know that, right? So understanding that person, meeting them where they're at, looking at their safety level, taking ego out of the equation, right? When I started guide training, I thought, I've been working in the space forever. What am I going to learn that's new? And I was proven wrong so quickly, right? I learned so much great stuff in this certification course. So thank you both for those answers. Susan, I was bebopping and scatting there for you to buy you a couple of extra seconds.
I got this.
Okay.
This. So, so what Sara said about, I want to just rephrase it or reframe it a little bit. I think that, experiencing something in your body is like a gateway to a bigger change. And my goal would be that everyone would have some little piece of nature that they can count on and feel comfortable with or at whatever. And that's also kind of part of that gateway to a bigger change. And I also think that having this place that you feel comfortable and where you can feel that you belong, like a friend, is basically, one of our most powerful free antidotes to loneliness, which is such a huge issue right now. And so I feel like from a brain health perspective, the power of giving people that place that they feel that they can belong is a window to our individual health and to systemic change.
Oh, I love that so much. Once again, I'm extremely humbled to even know the three of you. So to be able to call you colleagues and friends is overwhelming at times. I thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you for making the world a bit better every single day. Thank you for being a part of this tonight. Thanks for being on the show, and for everybody, watching and listening. Had a great interview with Amos Clifford. May have heard of him. Episode 46, talking about ANFT and the way of the guide, and just a wonderful conversation. We're definitely going to have Amos back on. Susan and I've had some great conversations about how all of this fits into nature informed therapy guiding. We've heard from folks who have grants and federal government exposure. We've heard from folks who are talking healthcare and wellness, brain health. We talked about education. Bottom line is just not being afraid to talk to other people about this stuff. We've gotten in a bad habit of not connecting with our neighbors, not wanting to talk about things, fear of being judged. Just take that risk. Just go out there and talk about it. Find your tribe, find your group. It's not hard. Nature's right outside your front door, and you don't have to walk too far to find other people that love the same things you do. Right? Here's 3 of them on the screen with me right now. So thanks, everybody. Rana, thanks for having us.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks, Sarah and Susan and Ryan. What a great discussion. Very fast, yet some really
Thank you. Super grateful to have that be here.
Yes, thanks.
practical things.
Thank you, everyone.